Alright, so we're going to take a couple sets. I'm going to use the Labradar LX on its mini tripod before going over here on a miscellaneous target somebody left. We're going to see how pistol does with this being so low. Alright, had to move to much higher stance. So pistol was up about here, then it would roll. But when it was down here, originally nothing. Alright, same thing. Same height. Set 4. Alright, so we're done with Labradar. We're going to do shooting for accuracy. And I've never recorded a full session, so we'll see how this goes.
So here's the front. So you want the front side and the rear side even. With the distance of light between the two. If you're looking through the gun, when you grab the gun, your finger will be here. Okay? All this, keep your finger right there.
You hit the target.
That's what we don't do. Pick some up.
See where you're hitting?
Look up more. Yeah, right there. Gun pointed up like that. There you go. Right? You looked at back there. So which eye do you Okay, so you're going to
call that tight.
And bring your hand up and touch your target. The gun. Don't put your finger on the trigger yet. I just want you to touch the target.
You just be looking over your shoulder, man.
No worries.
Finger on the trigger. You're going to get a good grip. Good grip. Focus on that right.
Oh, it's time for cleaning.
You're going to hold it. Hold on. You're going to fire it. Okay?
I've never seen you that one jam on you here.
Stop. Slowly bring it back. We're going to shoot it now. This is the real thing right now. So when it fires, you freak out. Keep a good hold on to the gun.
They fail to eject, so we are going to do a little break.
There. Right. Okay, good. Don't go fast. Let's ease that trigger back nice and smooth. You did good. Okay, that was good. Okay, you did it. Really executed it perfectly.
I was going to ask you if you need some oil. You got it right there.
Oh yeah, I'm good.
The gun didn't go around. That's what's called a loose grip. So the gun was able to move, so the spring didn't have a change. So when I talk about the that's good. So you let the gun move, and the spring didn't have a change.
Alright, let's take that one more time. What do we got? Hit one.
Anticipating the recoil, just target, hold it down, just static.
let me show you something else.
Oh, that's
Right now, the gun, okay, and move with your left hand, so that you're not fumbling around with the gun, right? Does that make sense? Okay,
all right. So that's 10 rounds.
pick
One
the
more.
gun up, get my grip,
That's 15 on the bottom. 12 on the neck.
Good, perfect. Can I do that? I'm trying to find out. Okay, good. Everything looks good. Now we're going to fire. Get your sight picture. Nice. We're going to take another shot. Okay, so now this trigger, that safety goes into the trigger. So the first part of your trigger ball, doesn't happen. That's the ball.
Ah, the last one blew off.
So the wall.
I would do 3 in the next.
So it looks like this. Holding the trigger, now I kill the ball. Now I'm going to fire it. Boom. A down range. The gun is chambered around the side, but I kept my gun right there. Oh, it's right there. Listen. See that click? I didn't go off the trigger. Does that make sense? There's
Bad
the
breathing.
ball. There's the
Gotta
blade.
find an excuse. Alright, we'll go for 1 on that top. Single shot.
I bring it forward. Now it's ready to fire. Now we're going to do this drill without a bullet. I'll cycle the gun for you. It's going to be do it.
Ooh, that was terrible. Let's do that.
Yeah.
You can.
Feel that? That's the wall. That's where you want to be. Now that's
Bullseye. Also. One more. Now it's psychological.
Now we're going to fire.
Closer. Not there. Let's run 6 on
You're going to spin it to the rear, bring it forward, and now we're going to take another shot.
We'll go
2 shots.
bottom up on the left and top down on the right. That's not bad.
And use your thumb.
So.
Go forward. There you go.
Feel better?
That
Alright, top right.
Okay, now bring the trigger back to where you talked about the wall.
And so.
Now you're going to fire it and take it to the rear. Good. Oh.
Alright, didn't end on a happy note, but I'm satisfied. That's it for today's range.
Good.
Hello, YouTubers. Reloading Bench back with you once again. And we are back from the range. And today's range was very interesting because the focus of the range day was supposed to be what's in here, which you've seen before, and that is the Labradar LX. And we were going to, was going to test it with pistol, specifically 45 ACP and 9mm, which I did. So now we're going to talk about the recap, and that's where this 357, which is most of what's in here. Most of in here is 357, like 100 and some odd rounds of 357. And I'm going to do a recap of the lessons learned with this new Labradar LX. And the first lesson learned with the Labradar LX and this tripod, while in the standing position trying to record 45 ACP, is this didn't work. And by didn't work, I don't mean that the tripod did not function correctly, which it did, but when you think about what it got me in terms of height, that's where the issue comes in. Because as I stand right now, and that's why we have the tape measure, as well as Mr. Assistant's imitation pew-pew, I'm going to stand and put this at the height that I would be shooting and was shooting, and I'm going to measure that. So, this particular table is at 36 inches, about where the bench is. So this, obviously this information isn't going to be exact to the range today, but close enough. So for me, standing and pointing, I'm at roughly 64 inches. This pew-pew is at 64 inches. 64 inches, 36, 64 minus 36. All right, let me bust out my calculator because I've had coffee, I'm tired, and I don't want to think. 64 minus 36. If I can type, 64 minus 36, was that 28? Yes, 28. So roughly that's 28 inches. 28 inches from the bottom of this table, this top, to give or take. Let me see how that feels. 28 inches. Yeah, give or take. I'm gonna say, yeah, okay, I'll go with 28. 28 for consistency's sake. So 28 inches minus, and I was using, as I said, this tripod and this tripod. But the first tripod was this tripod. And I was using this mount on, actually no, I take it back. I was using this mount on this tripod, and I was screwing the Labradar directly into here, which I will say, by the way, did not feel good. Meaning the threads did not, see how that wants to go in at an angle? It did, see, there we go again, angle. I don't know if you can see that or if it's clear that it wants to almost cross thread, and it just didn't feel like, even that, look, that looks like it's going in at an angle. No gap there, that looks like an angle. So I did not want to force anything and cross thread anything, and you can see there's a begin of chew right there. So I would say this is a fail as far as I'm concerned, because It just, even right now, it does not feel good. Even when I was trying to counterclockwise to find the right groove, it just, as I struggle right now to find the groove, there we go, it didn't feel good. So I'm going to give the Plasto tripod a fail in terms of trying to get everything together. So when you think about how high that is, and there's no angle adjustment to this at this point. There is with the other tripod. We're at roughly 8 inches high. So 28 inches from total height of this and 8-inch height of this makes around a 20-inch difference. Yeah, roughly a 20-inch distance. This isn't good for a 20-inch delta. The original Labradar, being, as big as it was, roughly bigger than a ruler, and sitting on its tripod or mini table, made a big difference in that 28 inches or that 20-inch delta. This one, not so much. And what that essentially means is that my first 3 shots with the 45 ACP did not get recorded. So as I turned it on, and by the way, I upgraded the firmware before I went to the range. So I tested everything, and I had the battery charge up to 95%. And as it was plugged in, I downloaded the latest firmware, which changed the screen a little bit. So and since the screen's a little hard to see because, I still have the stuff on it and whatnot. So I really don't know, because as I'm looking through the video right now, it doesn't look like it's picking it up very easily. So when you look at, I'm at 87% battery right now. And when you think about how much I shot, I only did 4 sets. And I wrote down what time I started. 12:40, so that was 15 minutes. Ceasefire 10. This thing was only on for not even 20 full minutes, and I lost nearly 10%. So 95 to 87, what's that? 8% of battery charge. But I did have the settings so it never went to sleep, and the screen never dimmed. So it was this bright for the entire time, which I'm sure affected the performance. The battery life. But when you talk about performance, now let's see if I can get this right. And again, on off, your sets, going into a particular set, this was 5 shots of 5, the 4th shot, the 3rd shot, and it's giving me my average, my high, my low, and let's see if I can get into or figure out how to get into my different set. Obviously, I have no clue what I'm doing in terms of getting into the set. Let's see. Nope. I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. That's arm, and you get the orange for arming. So let me disarm. That was, I want to say that is the set, but I'm not sure how to get to set number 1. 5, 4, I think that's what it is. There's set 1 of 5. So let me go into set 1. Set 1 of 5 in the folders. Let me go into here. So yeah, I'm gonna have to bust out the fucking manual. This is just not super intuitive as far as I'm concerned when scrolling back through things. So let me see if the app is any friendlier. I also updated the app. And what's interesting is it says this mobile app version requires Labradar LX firmware version 1.010 or higher to access the latest features and bug fixes. What's very interesting is, actually, if you go up, if you go to About, the latest version to download of the firmware was 1.0.9. So how can you tell me I need 1.0.10 when you don't even offer it? So as of today, the latest firmware update on their site that I downloaded was 1.09. So how can you tell me you need version 1.10 or later? You don't have version 1.10 or later to offer me. All right, so the app is a little easier, and I don't know what my phone is either showing or not because the bright light, but it says I have my 5 series, total of 22 shots. So it was not a very successful day. So yeah, using the Labradar to scroll through sets, I'd much prefer this particular interface because this is, as the original Labradar, a little quirky. All right, so set number 1, shots. Highest velocity, 620, lowest, 614. I'd have to read up on what the power factor is, extreme spread, and standard deviation being the difference between the two. And it says 2 shots fired. Well, I took a total of 5 shots, and the reason only 2 shots were fired is because the first 2 shots were on this. And I think we can turn this off because there's no reason to continue to have it on. The first 2 shots were while this was on the bench and I was shooting this pew pew 45 ACP 20 inches above the head of this. And the first 3 shots were nothing. Didn't catch anything. So then I switched over. Yeah, I do not like how that feels going in there. Yeah. So this is yeah, I don't know what to say about this. Not my fave. So I'm gonna call this kind of junky junk, not preferred. I do like this. This is an original Labradar tripod. Where's the freaking cute Labradar? There it is. There's the Labradar logo. And as high as this goes is how I had it on the bench. All right, so when you have this on the bench and you have the Labradar mounted on here, and I like this because, as I showed you at the beginning, having the Labradar permanently screwed into this, just like I have this was on my regular Labradar, my full size. All you have to do to mount it in here is just do that, and it's a snap. So that would be screw it in once and never have to worry about these quirky threads or this quirky mount going into the quirky threads. I'm not sure where the quirkiness is. I'm going to go with the threads more so than the mount. But in any case, fully extended, this tripod without the Labradar mounted is 17 inches. With the Labradar mounted, we're at 20 inches. So now, with my 28-inch height and this 20-inch difference, or this 20-inch addition with the Labradar, we're just talking about an 8-inch delta in terms of sound. That worked fine. So, series number 2. Oh, shit. There was a reason we had this on. So now look how long this takes to 1, 1000, 2, 1000, 3, 1000, 4, 1000, 5, 1000, 6, 1000, 7, 1000, 8, 1000, 9, 1000, 10, 1000, 1, 1000, 2, 1000, 3, 1000, 4, 1000, 5, 1000, 6, 1000, 7, 1000, 8, 9, 20 seconds, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, and I'm being liberal. That was 25 slow seconds. So I'm going to say this took 30 seconds to boot up. Is that a big deal? And notice how I have 86%, which is 1% more than what I had a minute ago, which I think is kind of funny. All right, so again, back to the phone. 5 series recorded. Series 1 only caught 2. Series 2 only caught 4, and I shoot in groups of 5 when I'm at the range for whatever sake. This only recorded 4 of 5. Again, the same. You can see more details, each of the individual shots, and such. So obviously, to me, this is much easier to use than this. So this is great for recording it. This is great in terms of ease of use. Again, in my opinion, you don't have to understand and what the weird sequence, which is an original inheritance for better or worse of the Generation 1 Labradar, of all the different push buttons to get what you need. And if you don't use this thing on a regular basis, you forget, like I obviously have, and I'm clueless. Okay, series number 3 was a very successful 5 for 5 with my 45 ACP, and everything was recorded. So I'm in the range of 642 to a low, or 651 as a high and a low of 604. I do load light powder on my 45 ACP. What did I do? There we go. I do load light. I only run 230 grain cast lead moly coated bullets, and pretty consistent. I think I'm at 4.1 on my powder drop for WST, and I'd have to double check that, but very consistent in terms of what I load. So then I was like, okay, we're cool. So let's go over to 9mm. Notice how I have 10 shots here. And part of the reason for these 10 shots is because, again, when you look at some of the deltas, I think I was shooting still my 45 ACP because you have. Actually, no, I take that back. This was straight 9mm. I was trying to shoot 9mm. The person to my right, and I'll show a picture of the bench, who was teaching his girlfriend how to shoot, he was really close to me and my bench because he was letting his girlfriend stand in the middle of the bench. So he stood to the left of it, which, when you're shooting, you're standing in the middle of the bench. So he was shooting to the left of her, showing her what to do. So he was very close to me. I was picking up his shots. And as I stood and watched, the dude to my right, to my left, he was shooting 357. And when I looked over, it was very frustrating because I was watching the Labradar just tick up, recording shots I wasn't taking, which I thought was funny because I just stood back. I had the pew-pew on the bench, and I was watching this record, and I'm thinking to myself, wow. And I had sensitivity set to the default. So let me go into settings. Time and date I set. Weight units, who cares? But I had it set for 230 grains. velocity units, projected weight, distance. I was at 10 yards. Trigger level, that's what I'm looking for. Trigger level, I had set to medium default, and I believe trigger level is how it picks it up, meaning max loud, default, or quiet. So maybe I should have set this to loud or quiet, or tinkered with it and adjusted it, but I didn't. So what ended up happening was I was recording everybody's shots to the right and to the left of me. And the cowboy on the left, which I thought was hilarious, I have to talk about this because it was funny. Again, he was shooting, and most of this is 357, so he must have shot 100 rounds, brand new brass, which I was very happy to pick up. And so the way he stood was, and again, I'll show the picture of the bench, a standard bench. If this was the wall, you would have your body at the front of the bench right here. Your pew would be way up here into the bench. So when the brass is ejecting, it would be hitting the wall. Well, his brass wasn't ejecting because he was shooting a revolver. But the point being, the pew would be pretty far forward into the bench, meaning the sound and the shock of the round being fired would be absorbed by the wall and hopefully not picked up by my Labradar. What was happening, however, was this dude was standing so far back in terms of the bench that, and his stance was funny, which I'll talk about, that his pew was barely at the edge of the wall. So if this was ejecting, his pew was right here at the edge of the wall in between the benches, the wooden wall, meaning he was way too far back. And I kept looking over, like, hey, dude, you're getting a little scary there because you're almost out of your bench. How far back do you want to go before you shoot? And to add on top of how far back his pistol was he was standing in a stance, left foot forward, right foot back, and he was arching his back in a reverse C. So his head and his shoulders were almost at an angle as his pistol. He couldn't get his pistol far enough away from him, and he couldn't lean far enough back away from the pistol. If he leaned any farther back, he looked like he was going to fall over. So when I saw that, I thought, okay, this is probably a new shooter because, his position, his body, the feet weren't bad, but the body looked terrible in terms of alignment with the pistol. And my read on him was, I think he's afraid. And then when I saw him packing up later, I thought, okay, that's probably why. I think he's a newer shooter, because he put that Colt back in his blue plastic Colt original purchase case. The black, I don't know why I keep saying black, the blue plastic that all new Colt pews ship in, as opposed to like a bag or any type of shooting, type of rug or mat or zippered bag or whatever, or gun case. So his gun case for carry back and forth to in his range bag was his blue plastic Colt box, for lack of a better word, container. So I was getting all of his shots too. So I think my last series, I fired a couple of I waited until the guy on the left and the guy on the right were out of shots, and then I quickly fired some of my 9mm. So you can see the difference between what my 9 was picking up at, and let's see if that deviates from a whole lot from, because the guy next to me was shooting 9mm as well. So yeah, between the 9mm, and again, I don't know if this was picking up his 9 or the 357. next to me. But bottom line is, I wasn't shooting any of these 10 shots that the Labradar picked up. Again, I shoot in groups of 5. So I fired off those 3, and I honestly can't remember if the other 2 weren't picked up, which would make sense. Again, very, very interesting on how either good or bad the pickup of this particular device is based on where it's positioned. So let's see. Relatively consistent, 1110, 1105, 1123 being the highest. Okay, so the lesson learned and what I did different on this than I did with my large original Gen 1 Labradar was seated versus standing. 90% of what I used my Gen 1 Labradar for was rifle, and at my range you have to be seated for rifle. So having the Labradar Gen 1, I would never put it on this tripod, because with this tripod and the height of the Labradar and the heaviness, it's too big. It's too top heavy and too easy to, for anyone who owns it or have used it, too easy to knock and hit and potentially have fall down. So even at this level, even as short as that is, which is why I like the plate, the Labradar plate that is no longer available, because that distributed the weight and the height issues, eliminated the height issues and distributed the weight across the plate. So if you did bump the Labradar, nothing's tipping, because the center of gravity is too short. So everything I did for the most part on the Gen 1 Labradar was rifle based. And if you look back on my channel, you'll see I have a number of Labradar results for my 5x7, 5.7x28 testing. And at my range, 5.7 is not allowed on the stand-up side, on the pistol side, so you have to shoot 5.7 on the rifle side, and the rifle side is seated only. So I used my Labradar for my 5.7 as well as my rifle testing for velocity in a seated position. So in a seated position, where the chair is and where the height of the Labradar, there's no issue with the muzzle being near enough to the Labradar to pick up the shot. So that being said, using this Labradar with this tripod is not good enough. You need a bigger tripod to get it closer to the height of your pistol in order to pick it up. The second thing is, if you're going to use your Labradar at the pistol range, don't do it when it's busy or do it with when you're not in between somebody. You're at one side or another, again, where there's no one around you, so that the Labradar is not picking up the volume from the bench to your left or the bench to your right, or go to a seated position, and then everything is picked up a little different. The benches on the rifle side are spaced farther apart. They're bigger stalls, bigger everything, as opposed to the tighter spaces in the pistol standing area. So, things to consider. It's just not a great idea to try and use a Doppler radar when there's a whole bunch of other sounds around you, because you're trying to isolate things. So I'm not going to fault the Labradar on this go round in terms of how good or bad it performed for picking up the sounds, because quite frankly, it was just too busy. And with Mr. Cowboy Wannabe, with his stance and shooting, going through a ton of 357, which is loud, And then the guy next to me, the other guy, trying to teach his girlfriend, and he's showing off, trying to show her what to do, and he's, you know, pow, 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 pow. You know, just a little, you know, not the ideal conditions to test, you know, something for chronographing your shots. And to be honest, I don't really do any chronographing for pistol. I just wanted to try this out because it was so much smaller. Again, the bench space for pistol is there's less bench space to set everything than there is on the rifle side of the range. And so I thought the compactness of this particular unit, even with the tripod or the original, you know, the mini tripod would be fine. So this mini tripod, you know, as I fault this particular thing, so maybe I need to get, you know, another one of these thingy bobs. I don't know if anybody knows, you know, what the universal name of this thing is, of this particular thing is. That would be great, because I would add that to this setup so that it's permanently mounted to my Labradar LX, so I don't have to muck around with that particular mount and cross thread anything. So if anyone knows, let me know. Otherwise, you know, I'll get out on the interweb and start poking around and see if I can learn myself. But again, I'll call these lessons learned, interesting tidbits. As okay, now I can't get this where I want it. Interesting tidbits of learning, because you know, going to the range and doing this stuff is how you learn. So if I had to do all over again, I'd probably take a day off from work and go to the range in the, you know, middle of the day or early morning, late afternoon, when it's probably not busy. Ask for a bench to one end, and then do things in a more quiet fashion. But it's much easier to deal with a rifle and have the muzzle, you know, at this height. In my opinion, having the muzzle, you know, at this height on the bench is much easier than dealing with standing and having, you know, the muzzle, you know, 28 inches above the bench or 64 inches above the ground, and then trying to adjust the Labradar up that high. You know, I personally would not have a tripod plus the Labradar at you know, 64 inches high. Unless, you know, that was my only choice, or this particular setup, or this setup wasn't working for me. And I think the final lesson learned is, you know, you're going to do a Labradar test for either pistol or rifle loads. I'm going to say relatively infrequently. You know, you build up a load, you test the load, and then you're done with that load. Go and do that testing seated. So that seated, this height with this particular, in my case, this particular tripod is a non-issue. So, and with the size of the bench spacing, again, even having somebody next to you wouldn't be an issue. So I'm going to call that lessons learned for the Labradar LX at the range.